Yo guys, what is going on? JPS back for another video, and today we're going to be reacting to the ugly truth about tipping and why you shouldn't. And I apologize, my voice is a little off because of allergies. I have a really sore throat. But this was recommended by one of my patrons. Really appreciate the recommendation. And I thought it'd be a good video because, as you know, tipping in the United States is something that's considered like customary. It's a bad practice not to tip, and almost everyone does it. Whereas in the United Kingdom, tipping is like not really a thing that people do on the regular. Sometimes I've heard people do it sometimes if they got really good service or they're feeling generous, but the norm is not to tip. Whereas in the United States, we have an obligation to pay the waiter or waitress's salaries. So this should be an interesting video to check out. I've never actually looked into this, and I always question tipping before I do it, but I still do it obviously. But should be interesting. Sorry about the voice, but hit that like button and subscribe, and let's get right into it.
Hey, 42 here. Elvis Presley once asked his limo driver, "Do you own this limo or do you work for the company?" The driver responded that he just worked for the company. Elvis replied, "Well, you own it now." The driver's tip from Elvis was the limo. So if you're not a big baller tipping a goddamn limo every time you leave the house, then what the hell is wrong with you? At least that's the way that unnecessarily judgmental waitstaff hope you feel when you leave whatever shreds of disturbing paraphernalia you found at the bottom of your wallet as a tip. But seriously, in North America, tipping feels like an obligation. After finishing your delicious meal, you feel an overwhelming sense of guilt were you not to leave a tip. And you just know that if you don't, then you'll get the steamingly judgmental look from the waiter as you shamefully waddle out of the restaurant. It's the same look you would get if you broke into their home and replaced their toothpaste with cyanide. Maybe not quite the same. And there's one country that has made it their hobby to give away free money after their gigantic meals: America.
Oh yeah.
The USA is by far the world's leader in tipping, leaving an astonishing $40 billion of tips on restaurant tables every year. But the ironic thing is that America imported the idea of tipping from Europe, where it has since fallen out of custom. In Europe, we usually tip as a convenience, to just round up the bill, because it's simply easier to leave a 2p tip than to count out £49.98 in change. Yes, I have left a 2p tip, and no, I'm not ashamed of that, and hopefully by the end of this video, you'll understand why. Journey back to 17th century Tudor England, where taverns began putting out jars labelled "to ensure promptitude," hence the word tip. When wealthier patrons put some of their extra money into the tip jar, the bartender would be sure to serve them before everyone else. By the mid-18th century, wealthy American businessmen who thought that adopting European traditions would make them more sophisticated brought back the idea of tipping to America and started to use it in their daily lives, tipping any old poor sod from the shoeshine boy to their driver. It wasn't long before the railway companies and many restaurants caught on to this new tipping phenomenon. And of course, their very first thought was, "Oh boy, we can use this to be even more racist. Yay!" And so restaurant owners and railway operators all over America began hiring newly freed black slaves to work for no wage whatsoever, telling them that they would only get paid if they received tips from customers. So the business owners didn't have to fork out a single penny. The public were against this idea, and the unions campaigned against tipping, but of course the extremely wealthy railway companies and other corporations eventually won the battle, forever cementing tipping as a racist foundation of the American working class economy.
Like every foundation.
And brainwashing future generations into heavily integrating gratuity as a social norm. Ah, the old American railroad. Tipping makes people feel powerful. Studies have shown that people enjoy the notion that they can control the level of service they receive because they can hold back tips if they don't receive said service. Which, if you think about it, it's slightly disturbing how sociopathic that makes most of us. We all secretly enjoy knowing that we can stop another human from being able to afford food if it takes our fancy. We probably wouldn't, but it's just nice to know we can, you know? But the cold, raw, distasteful reality of restaurant gratuities is that the level of service doesn't matter. A surprisingly large number of studies and research papers have been done on tipping and why we do it. If you have a free afternoon instead of your usual self-loathing, give them a read, unless of course you're not me and you have some things to do. But they all essentially conclude the same result, that tipping behaviour is completely random. There is no logic to when and how much people tip. It is certainly not linked to good service. It's probably more closely correlated to a customer's shoe size, to be honest. Astonishingly, receiving good or bad service...
It's probably more like corresponds more with their wealth. If you have more money, you're going to tip more, probably.
Only changes the amount people tip, on average, from between -1% and +1%.
Wow.
So, there you go, all you waitstaff out there. You could literally slap your customers in the face with a ripe salmon. And the worst that would happen is you'll receive 50 pence fewer tips. And you thought you never learnt anything useful from this channel. Waiter performance may not have any effect on tipping, but there are things that most certainly do have an effect. According to various studies, waitresses with larger breasts, smaller body sizes and blonde hair earn quite a bit more from tips than those without such features, as much as 50% more, and that's from both men and women. So it seems most of us mistake our local eatery for a frickin' strip club. Disturbingly, white servers are on average tipped more than black servers, regardless of the race of the customer. But not only is the average diner a racist perv, you'll be pleased to find out that they're also completely irrational. Woo! Research has shown that we leave a larger tip if a waiter touches us on the arm, draws a smiley face on our bill, if they wear red, or if they squat next to our table whilst taking our order like a restless ape. A modern habit that I find particularly annoying. The last thing I want when trying to relax is an overly smiley waiter squatting 2 centimeters from my actual face, and recommending I get a side of every damn thing on the menu with that. But hey, research shows that it seems to work for most people. And if you thought that that waitress was being extra friendly towards you because they wanted a larger tip, or she found you unbearably attractive, then, my friend, you are delusional. There are a set of secret rules within the restaurant industry that everyone working in the food business quickly picks up. Rules about who tips and who doesn't, and who tips the most. Research shows that couples tip more than groups, men tip more than women, and businessmen tip even more. Waiters very quickly find out which demographics and table sizes leave the least and the most in tips, and they will adjust their service accordingly. Waiters will automatically pay more attention and give quicker and friendlier service to couples or businessmen, knowing full well that they're likely to leave larger tips than average. And they will lower their quality of service for large groups. I'm not saying that every waiter does this, but researchers found that the vast majority of restaurants admit that their waitstaff practice this very kind of favouritism towards higher tippers. So, before you even sit down, your level of service has been predetermined, just because of how you're dressed and who you're with. Just one more reason of many not to dine out naked. You can't blame waiters for this. When most of their income comes from tips, they are of course going to pull every trick in the book to milk every last penny out of the customers. So, who should we blame for everything wrong with the economic failure that is tipping? I'll give you 2 guesses. Your own mother? No. Rasputin? No. Why, the government, of course. In America, there are 2 variations of the minimum wage. The normal minimum wage that the majority of jobs receive, and then the tipped minimum wage, which employers are allowed to legally pay their employees if they work in an industry where tips are accepted, such as servers, the hotel industry, taxi drivers, and just about 1,000 other professions, as it seems every year Americans like to play a game of who else can we possibly tip? Hairdressers? Yeah. Cleaners? Yeah. Drug dealer? Hitman? Why the hell not? Can we all just take a moment to realise how insane a tipped minimum wage is? Employers can legally pay their hard-working employees less than a third of the minimum wage, a measly $2.13 per hour in most states. And then customers are expected to pay the employees on the restaurant's behalf? Let me think. Last time I purchased a car, I didn't sit down for a budget meeting with the management afterwards to decide whether I would be contributing 20 or 25% towards the salesman's salary. But that is essentially what you're doing every time you tip in America, so long as the tipped minimum wage is a thing. Call me a maverick!
Yo, actually, I got something to add. When you're tipping, like, the tips don't even always go to the servers. Like, I worked in an Italian restaurant, and I was a server, dang! And I had a set wage regardless of how many tips I got, and it was just, they were very like vague about the whole tipping thing. So the tips go to the restaurant regardless, because they're always going to overflow that minimum wage mark of $7.25, even if it's set at $2.13. I mean, that $5 difference will be made in an hour easily, because people tip a lot. So yeah, you're not really paying for the server, you're just paying the restaurant and the corporations when you tip. But it's customary, so I'm still going to do it. Unless this guy convinced me more in this next 10 minutes.
But here's a crazy idea. Should it not be an employer's responsibility to pay their staff a decent living wage? Why should a customer who is already paying for their meal have to pay the staff's wages too? For an employee to legally qualify for the tipped minimum wage, they only have to earn $30 of tips per month. To put that into perspective, in America, if I tip someone $30 who doesn't usually receive tips, say an electrician, their employer can then legally cut their wage that month from $7.25 per hour to $2.13 for every hour they have worked that month.
That's why when you get a tip, you put it in your pocket, don't tell the employer.
Because I decided to be a generous sod. So, by tipping in restaurants, Americans are ensuring that restaurant owners can legally pay their waiters pennies and get away with it. The problem is, every single American would have to stop tipping overnight to solve the issue, and that's like asking bears to stop shitting in the woods.
Yeah.
Because just $30 of tips in any given month will prevent waiters from receiving a normal bloody wage, and that is of course never going to happen. So it is completely understandable why people who do stick to their morals and refuse to tip in America are seen as jerks and chased down the street with cake forks and steak knives, even if their morals do make perfect economic sense. Because, sadly, until the laws change, tipping is essential to allow waitstaff to actually feed themselves. But even when everyone tips, it's still a really bad deal for employees. Numerous studies have shown that servers are 3 times as likely to experience poverty than the average worker, and they are significantly more likely to make use of welfare programs to survive. Although this isn't as much of a problem in some states where the tipped minimum wage has been raised. The Department of Labor in the US investigated over 9,000 restaurants, and they found that 84% of restaurants in the states where the tipped minimum wage is $2.13 abused the tipped minimum wage to enable them to pay their waitstaff far less than any non-tipped employee. And yes, that is also accounting tips into their wages. But there is a poor group of victims of the tipping culture who get a far worse deal than the waitstaff, but unlike waiters, never get any recognition. Cooks. As a great lover of the culinary arts, I believe that in most countries, kitchen staff are underpaid. It's an extremely demanding and stressful job, working fast-paced in high temperatures for long hours, and a high level of skill and training is required. But this problem of kitchen staff being underpaid is so many times worse in countries that have a tipping culture. For some reason, at one point in human history, I'm not sure when, but some people in a room decided that the people who have spent years of training at culinary school and who arrive early in the morning every morning to begin meticulously prepping every element of your dish, and then after many hours of mise en place, these line chefs can finally toil away at a hot stove for many hours to skillfully cook and beautifully plate your delicious dinner. Those people in a room, whoever they were, once decided for some ungodly reason that these hidden heroes of the restaurant industry should get paid 0% of the tips.
Yeah.
Zilch, nada, bugger all.
That is true.
Yet this teenager with absolutely no training who picks up that dish and carries it 5 meters to your table should get 100% of your tips. Well, that sounds a bit unfair. But unfortunately, people don't give a flying sausage, because the truth is, we all tend to forget that kitchen staff exist.
Yeah.
It's easy to go to a restaurant, and because you see all the pretty waitresses, you forget that there's an army of culinary gargoyles behind the kitchen shutters, and they're the reason you actually went to that restaurant, to eat their food. They say waitressing is a thankless job, but it's extremely rare that someone gives thanks to the person who just singed their eyebrows flambeing your tartare. There are some restaurants who recognise this disparity and collect all the tips and then share them out equally between the front of house and the back of house staff. But the vast majority of restaurants still distribute all their tips solely to the front of house staff. In certain US states, statistics show that with tips, waitstaff earn significantly more than kitchen staff. And not just the dishwasher, more than the sous chef and the head chef.
Wow.
In Seattle, for example, the average waiter earns $28 per hour with tips, whereas prep cooks and line chefs earn a pathetic $10 to $12 per hour, and the average head chef is just on $18 per hour. That's right, the individual with the highest amount of training, skill and expertise in the whole darn restaurant still only earns 64% of what the waiters do. I'm not trying to disparage waiters at all, they do an incredibly tough and important job, but there's an obvious difference in expertise between waiting and professional cooking. There has been a move in recent years by some example-setting restaurants, particularly in New York, to abolish tipping for good. Some restaurants now openly state that they no longer accept any tips, and instead add a 15 or 20% optional service charge to every bill, which is evenly distributed between all staff, including the kitchen staff. But there's a mysterious place that has been setting an even better example for as long as restaurants have existed. A place where food is the very embodiment of its culture. A country that has been awarded more Michelin stars than the UK and France combined. And a place where you can be served ramen by a maid.
Japan.
Where is this magical place, you ask? Of course, it is Japan. Not only is tipping not a part of Japanese culture, but tipping in Japan is actually seen as an insult. It's funny, if you want a waitress to spit in your food in North America, you forget to tip. Whereas in Japan, you'd have to do the complete opposite and actually tip to get some salival revenge. Not that the ultra-polite Japanese would ever stoop that low. If you did insult a Japanese chef, the worst that would probably happen is they would just give you a slightly less enthusiastic bow. Why is tipping in Japan so insulting? Because it is viewed by Japanese people as charity, rather than a reward for good service. It can be seen as you implying that the restaurant isn't doing well enough to pay their workers a proper salary. It's also construed that you may be marking them on their performance, and Japanese restaurant workers really don't like that, because they always believe that they are giving 100% effort. In Japanese culture, people don't just go to work and work tirelessly for money to buy more sushi and manga. They also do it for honour. A sense of honour for one's boss, for the workplace, and more importantly, for the customers, is a deeply held moral in Japan. So if a Japanese waiter knowingly gave a customer bad service, then their honour would be impeached upon, which is punishment enough upon itself. A service charge is already included in the price of your meal in most restaurants in Japan in the form of a seating charge called otoshi, literally meaning to pass. It's a small fee to pay for your table in the restaurant, and as a way to indirectly pay for service, taking the place of what tips would do in the Western world. But the nice thing about the otoshi fee over tipping is that you actually get something in return for your money. And no, it's not those wooden chopsticks that you impatiently snap apart as soon as you sit down. As a thank you for paying the seating fee, you get a small plate of food as soon as you are seated. Something to nibble upon whilst reading the menu, kind of like an amuse-bouche. It's usually a tasty little morsel such as edamame beans or some seafood. The fee for the otashi is automatically added to your bill, and then it's out of the way, forgotten about. You can enjoy your meal, say thank you and leave. Instead of having to do mathematics after your meal to work out a tip, and if you're in a group, work out how to split that tip up, just creating awkwardness. Because no doubt everyone will want to tip a different amount, and you can guarantee that there will be one member of the group who's gotten so magnificently trolleyed that they already put their tip into some unfortunate waitress's garments. Or maybe I've just been hanging out with the wrong sort of people. In fact, tipping isn't done across the whole of Asia. It's more of a Western, well to be more specific, North American phenomenon. In Europe, waiters are paid living wages the same as any other profession, and on the continent service charges are commonly added to bills to replace tips, similar to the Japanese otoshi system. In Italy, for example, you are often given complimentary bread or even a beverage to start your meal as part of the service charge. The Italians call this a coperto or servizio. There is just nothing good about tipping. In every aspect, it is futile, unfair, it promotes discrimination, it creates awkwardness for everyone involved, and the end result is customers pay more and staff earn less. It's about time we take a lesson from Asia and abolish this archaic practice of automatic tipping once and for all. Of course, there's nothing wrong with tipping on occasion, if a particular person has gone out of their way to make your night truly special and memorable. Even I tip in those circumstances, just for those of you who now think I'm the most tight-fisted person in all of NATO. But tipping automatically, in the words of Mr. Pink, is for the birds. Thanks for watching. If this video has...
Alright. Okay, a lot to unpack there. Going into the video, I thought it was going to be more so like a comparison between the United States and the United Kingdom, but he brought in Japan, which I thought was actually really interesting, and even Italy a bit at the end there. But what I will say is this has not changed my mind about tipping, and it won't change many Americans' mind, because it's just one of those things like you're between like a rock and a hard place, because you have to pay the waiter or waitress's wage. Like, not tipping just feels terrible, you know what I mean? And along with that, it's just a cultural thing that's so deeply ingrained into American dining etiquette that it's just so hard to take away. Like, it would require some sort of like legislature where they're like saying restaurants are not allowed to put the little tip line at the bottom of a bill. I'm really sorry about my voice. I'm trying my best to not talk like this, but I can't. Along with that, I feel like when people get their bill, they're always like, why do we tip? Why do we tip? Why do we tip? And then still tip. I mean, I say that every time, but I don't know. It's just one of those things, you know what I mean? So let me know if you tip, first of all, because I thought this was going to be more about the UK and stuff and tipping, but let me know what tipping is like for you, and if you're someone who tips at all or not. It should be something that you can discuss publicly. It's not really a private thing. I think it should be more normalized, but it isn't really normalized here. I'm going to stop talking now. Hit that like button, hit subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.